Alan? Just come and...
So busy rather to close.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Right.
it's the first time.
Oh, I've forgotten all my notes.
Oh, God. Just headbutted.
Ideal phrasing, yeah.
May I just speak directly into the microphone?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Okay.
fine. I'll
Oh, yeah,
lean.
yeah.
I'll lean. It's fine. Don't worry.
Lovely.
So, I hope you're all watered and de-watered successfully. And I hope you all enjoyed the film as much as I did. It was, I think it's quite an inspiring way of looking at what could happen if we make the right choices and the right decisions about the future. So, first of all, I'm just going to introduce our panel here. We've got two young co-chairs of what is called Generation Z, or Gen Z.
Zero.
Generation Zero. Okay, so this is part of Zero Carbon Shropshire, which is, well, it's not part of, but it's affiliated to Zero Carbon Shropshire and the Shropshire Climate Action Project, which was partly set up co-founded by Alan here. Yeah. So we've got Jess, who is a student at Leeds University. Sorry, got that wrong. Eleanor is a student at Leeds University.
Yeah.
And you're studying sustainability and environmental sciences. Is that
Close enough.
correct? Yeah, environmental management, sorry. That's the next step up from science. And Jess works for Shropshire Council, and you are starting a Master's in Political Ecology at Lancaster University shortly.
Yes. Yeah.
This autumn, yeah. So, as I say, they're both co-chairs of Zero Carbon Shropshire, which is, Generation Zero, which is the youth part of the Shropshire Climate Action Project. So they are the future. Alan, however, is the past, like me. He founded the Shropshire Climate Action Project, or co-founded it, and also an organisation called Save Our Shropshire, which is all about carbon literacy and what we can do to change the way we live, to reduce our footprint and so on in the world. So, there we go, and I'm just the facilitator. So, having watched the film, does anyone here in the church have any questions? I know that online you'll be able to post your questions via Facebook, and I think you've been sent a link to do that online. But does anyone have anything that they'd like to ask the panel about what we can do perhaps in Shropshire or anything? Probably to do with the film. Yes. Just introduce yourself first.
Beryl Shelton, if a supportive member of Extinction Rebellion.
Extinction Rebellion, just to pronounce that correctly.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
make
only
sure
HS.
everybody hears it.
It's only HS2 then.
She's a rebel.
A rebel. If we implement really strongly all the methods and points that everyone's pointing out that we have to do, will the ice caps ever recover?
Ooh. Right. Will. Okay. Who is qualified to answer this? Will the ice caps ever recover if we put all of this into practice?
I think we've got to actually make an assumption here, not in my lifetime anyway.
Yeah.
That's one. If we were to implement the actions that are recommended, well, it isn't a question of if, it's a question of we must implement these things, even if it does mean a little bit of hard work and a lifestyle change for everyone, because everyone has a part to play in this. Each of us has a carbon footprint. We can't get away from that. And equally, within society, we can't do like we did with the digital age, where there's generations that can't use a computer. Everybody has got to come on this journey. We can't leave anybody behind. So in answer to your question, will the ice caps recover? Yes, over time, provided the actual three things that are required. One, the reduction in carbon and other gases within the atmosphere which trap heat, the global warming effect. Two, our lifestyles change to enable that to be maintained and implemented to reduce. But equally, it then becomes Mother Nature's job to rebalance the salination of the oceans to ensure that those currents that maintain the cold in that part return. Otherwise, nature will not recover without our help. It's as simple as that.
Yes, so the answer is that they might, Beryl, but not in our lifetime. I think it's unlikely to be in any of our lifetimes. We are, it's going to be...
We've passed a tipping point, and that tipping point needs to be corrected. That's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I can give a scientific answer. I think it would be the same, really. Everyone has to kind of... Sorry, everyone kind of has to play their part, obviously, and obviously we hope that, the ice cap's going to regenerate and forests are going to regenerate. But I think it's naive to believe that it will just happen by itself. Like Alan said, you have to be proactive in your role. Definitely. And kind of take part yourself as well.
Yeah, so to repair the damage, it might take hundreds of years, but we can put the actions in place now. Yes.
So I love that distributed power generation model. How could we do that?
Well.
Okay, so the distributed power model looks really powerful. And I think one thing that Damien said in the film was that there are forces abroad who are trying to prevent that sort of model from being taken up in certain countries. How can we do that? How can we put together that sort of plan? Can we do it?
I can answer it if you want. Okay, right, I'll have a stab at answering this. Reality is we've got a system in this country where we have a centralised grid, and we have legislative processes in place that where bodies who are designated those roles. So you've got the district network operators who actually deliver it through the cables and all the rest of it to your homes. That's a legislative process. It's equally a process by which business says it will be done this way because this is the easiest way to do it. But that is because we've always got used to it being that way and held at a central way. People who are creating renewable energy within the county have great difficulty in hooking it up to the grid. This is for two reasons. One, there isn't the locations at which they can put the renewables into the grid. In other words, there's not the space or capacity at the substations. So then the requirement is to actually engage with the electricity providers and find a space for the renewables to come onto the grid. And that needs, in addition to what's just gone through as a consultation, further legislation to enable local renewables to be put into the system. And that's what a recent act was put through as a private member's bill to try and achieve that. So there are steps being taken, but it's going to be a long time before it actually comes to fruition. And some of the consultations the public aren't aware of, and that's sad. But it is actually publicised, but it isn't put out in the media so that you, the normal people of this world who actually want to have a say in this can actually have a say in what's going on. And that's the ever shielded side of that process. So it needs to be more transparent, more open, and far more simplistic. In answer to your question, there are new solar farms coming online, and they're going to have to be private wired to places because they can't get them into the grid. So industrial estates will be run by a private wire from that solar farm. Hopefully there's one going to be up and running shortly, and they've got to take the electricity from, well, literally 8 miles to get it to a substation that they can hook it up to the grid. That's thousands, and I mean thousands of pounds worth of connection just to get it onto the grid. And that's the other thing about renewable energy. It is made virtually impossible to hook it up to the grid because the cost involved makes it unviable. And that's the issue that we all face, and that's got to be addressed to make it simpler for these people to get renewable energy online.
Yeah, so the answer is that it can be done.
Yeah.
But I think the point about that, as as with a lot of these questions, is when is it going to be done? And we are the ones who have to apply pressure continually to change the status quo.
Yeah.
Yes. Just introduce yourself.
Isabella, is it more of the people that we need to convince? Because there are some stubborn people in the world that don't really want to change how they act, and maybe they want to stay how they are.
That is a very good point. So there are people who don't want to change. Now, game changers, Eleanor and Jess, how do you go about convincing people about what we need to do?
Okay, well, personally, I find it very hard to convince people around me, and my family and my friends, because of the ways they are. So I try and educate them through facts and telling them things that they might not have thought about before. Things like this film spreading a positive message about it is really important. Instead of, just showing the devastating effects of climate change, putting answers forward and, things we can actually do and things personally people can do as well. Even just little short changes they can make in their lives really inspires people instead of, shutting them down and thinking this is too big an issue for me to solve by myself.
Yeah.
And Eleanor, you, with Generation Z, or Generation Zero, you are you're co-chairs of this group, and you give talks, and you go attend events and so on to tell me exactly what goes on at those events, because I don't really know. I haven't been to one.
Well, we're still just really starting out. We only launched in April. But sort of main focus of our event so far has been mostly just sort of outreach and education, just sort of get these ideas out there, because there are so many young people, it's such an overwhelming issue that most people, don't think about it, don't think about day to day, and if you don't think about it, you don't really change your actions, you don't really consider it, it's much easier to just sort of press it down. So it's just sort of been getting our feelers out there and sort of getting people engaged in these issues to then sort of open the door to changing behaviour. And then I think the real power of that is it's the actual impact of your actions, but I think much more than that, it's then showing that message, getting that message across to companies, to the government, to the local council, that young people do care. Young people are buying second-hand, young people are, bringing their own water bottles, things like that. Just small actions that give a big message that say young people do care, young people are thinking about this and talking about this. And when we, go up and are in business and are CEOs and that kind of thing, those are the kind of things that we're going to be thinking about and prioritizing. So yeah, that's sort of what we're at the moment, is sort of getting the word out and getting people thinking and talking about it, really.
And you work with schools and youth groups and so on to get that message out.
Yeah, Yeah, and we're trying to work with as many people as possible, anyone who will kind of listen to us, because obviously as a younger generation, actually in 2040, I will be 43, so I'm not quite the same age. But it's really important that, you know, our young voices are heard, because, you know, we're the ones who are going to have to live through that really potentially horrible period of time. But we're also at the point, as you said, the tipping point where we can actually make the change to make our futures so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I answer this young
Yeah.
lady as well? It's a damn good question, it really is. How do you influence people to change? My role, and the way I see it within Save Our Shropshire as a charity, is to influence people to change. And that influence comes through talking and educating. And it doesn't have to be blinding education, just simple words expressing what the issues are. And that brings about a change in the way people think. Because they change the way they think, they want to know more information about it. Because they want to know more information, that brings about greater awareness. And as Jonathan will attest to, the fact that I'm rolling out some carbon literacy training for town and parish councillors across the county, getting that type of training together. Why? Because if we can influence our town and parish councillors, they're in a position to influence general public, and they can answer questions for the general public when they come to them. Very much like COVID, when it kicked off, we had all the bad news come through the press, what it was going to be a massive problem and all these sort of things, and it was all bad news, which is the same as you've seen now with climate change. It's all bad news being painted. There's no real positive messages coming through, and this is what's wrong. The positive messages need to be broadcast and become commonplace conversation, so that when you talk about stuff, you get solid, sensible answers back, not conjecture, something that's going to actually make a difference. And it could be as simple as, like I do with my daughter, I recycle her recycling and take tons of plastic out of her paper. It's as simple as that, doing little things. And I live in a house that's got 4 generations in it. So the fact is, we do live a lifestyle that is compact. We try and do things as eco-friendly as possible. And that's what you need to do, is look at your lifestyles, and it's educating people as to what they could potentially do themselves. And it's that little move towards that that brings the bigger change. Because there's 500,000 people in Shropshire alone. Never mind the world, we've got to start somewhere. And even if we just start with 500,000 people, that's a good start as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. Anyone else got a... Yes. I'm going to... Right with you.
Yes, sir. Introduce yourself. Oh, I'm Kevin.
Kevin?
Yeah. A question for Jess and Eleanor, actually.
Yeah.
Because I've got a 23-year-old son, Charlie, and he cares about all sorts of things. He cares about people, human rights, the environment, all that sort of stuff. But if I ask him too many questions, he gets very irritated with me. So I don't really connect with younger people via him, because, you know, I'm irrelevant to his life in that sense. And I just wanted to know, are young people, do they care about the environment and biodiversity, and or do they care more than their parents, or is it just as tough trying to convince them as it is trying to convince us oldies?
Jess and Eleanor.
Okay, so that's really interesting, actually, because obviously in our little group we're kind of surrounded by people and constantly having conversations with people who are very similar-minded. So it's quite easy to kind of get caught up in that and, you know, discuss ideas, and there's great stuff going on amongst ourselves. We don't really reach out to a wider audience who might not. But I think when we've talked to people on our social media, when we've got an event coming up, or when we've done previous events with very little kids, they know more than they let on, and I think they know more than we think they do. I mean, the event with, I think it was 5 to 8 year olds, I was talking about stuff and really trying to, dumb it down, if you like. And actually, I didn't need to at all. They were so aware of the issues already, which was really brilliant. And it actually produced some really good ideas, like the ones on the film. They know more and they are really passionate. And I think if you recognise that, you can get a lot of good stuff out of them, which is really helpful for everyone. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it is something to bear in mind that a lot of older generations probably heard climate change, the word climate change for the first time when they were, 20, 30, 40. Whereas our generations, we grew up with it. I was probably 2 when I knew that, we're on a burning planet. And so it is something that is sort of very fundamental to, I think, most young people. We know that the environment isn't in a healthy state. And kind of separate to that, something which I think is really cool about our generation is that being environmentally friendly is a bit of a trend. Like, even if you're not every day thinking about the climate, thinking about the planet and everything, it's kind of a compliment, or like it's kind of a pride thing to say, oh, this is thrifted, this is secondhand. We were saying on the way here, if you say, oh, I love your dress, and you say, oh, it's from a charity shop, it's like, oh, that's so cool, that's awesome, that's like eco-friendly. So I think that's something that's really powerful, and sort of something that we're trying to hop onto, is that it is really cool and it's really a hot topic to be eco-friendly, even if, like you say, you're not thinking about the climate day in, day out. You are thinking about, this is a really cool, clean way of living, and I think in that sense, yes, young people do think about it day in, day out, even if it's not an active thought.
Thank you. The timekeeping around here is brilliant, isn't it? Sort of, yes, Nikki.
Hi, I don't need to introduce myself. You were talking about how important the stories of hope are, and that film was brilliant for the global stories of hope, but I'm really interested in the Shropshire stories of hope. Do you have any of those?
Shropshire stories, local stories of hope, or what can we take, say, from that film into our lives here in Shropshire? What will make a difference to us here?
Because we're a rural county, we rely on transportation a lot, and there's equally there's a mindset with transport as well. We all like our own car because it gives us that independence. I think the point that was made in the film, which was very excellent, is that we're going to have a mindset change when it comes to transportation. I'm not actually up for all electric vehicles. I'm actually up for hydrogen-powered vehicles. The reason for that is because we can use electricity to electrolyse the hydrogen that we need for power. And equally, some of the stuff that we're going to have to do and continue to do will require a lot of energy, which electric vehicles won't generate. So there's going to have to be hydrogen in some vehicles. Now Bamford, that's JC Bamford, who make JCBs, who we know as big vehicles with lots of power behind them. Well, they've developed a hydrogen vehicle. They invented also an electric JCB. So they're doing things on both channels. But the point is, the way things are changing, the government's relying on innovation to put and sequestrate carbon by carbon capture, use and storage, if you've ever heard those phrases. And the fact is that technology doesn't exist at this moment in time. So we've got to come up with innovative ways locally. And the good news stories are in Shropshire is that there are people looking at planned areas to plant trees for carbon sequestration. That is obviously a plus. Then there's the way to do local food. In other words, you grow it locally, you use it locally. It isn't transshipped across the country. Same with waste. We've got a fantastic, how can I put it? Rate is the only way I can describe it, for recycling in this county. And the actual proprietors who work for the councils, that's Telford and Wrekin and Shropshire Council, Veolia, are working towards that recycling targets. And we, as citizens, are helping with that by the way that we actually put food in one thing and plastics in another, and we separate our stuff out. If we do it properly, that saves a whole load of stuff actually being burned. And that's the other thing. If we can reduce the burning of this stuff, that in itself is a plus. So when you start peeling the onion of Shropshire, there are some good news stories around. And it's not only in the way we do things, businesses are now starting to take on board about the way they do things to do with carbon, and looking at the way that their suppliers are carbon friendly and the way they transport stuff. They won't have the money like Amazon, where they can invest billions in this type of thing. Shropshire is made up of over 20,000 small businesses. That's 10 people or less. So you can't expect them to do the things that big organisations to do, but they are doing the things that are right for a small organisation to do, and working towards this goal of a zero carbon future. And I take my hat off to that, because they've got enough fighting to stay in business. So as well as taking this on, it's very laudable at this stage.
Thanks, Alan.
Okay.
So I think there was a girl in the film who came up. She mentioned the 3 R's, and that is something that we can all do. 3 R's being
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
yeah. So and I know you do it every day, Nikki. And I'm sure that all of us do to a certain extent, but we've got to do it more. We have got to be consciously mindful about every action that we take. It's almost as simple as that. Another question, last one, I think.
Add on to that. So you're saying that we should be confident that our recycling, it's not just 10% gets recycled in Shropshire, which is the sort of figure that you hear banded around, that actually they are doing a really good job here.
Yeah, it's not only the firm, it's you as well. It's actually appreciating what you're doing when you actually put it into the bins. You're actually getting into the right condition when it does go for recycling. So it's a question of getting it right. People say, why would I do it? Because when it goes to the cart, it just gets thrown in. I make all that effort and it just gets put in one big cart. But when it gets to the actual recycling centre, it is then sorted again. I know it seems an illogical way to do it, but that's the way the process works.
We trust Veolia. We trust them.
We trust
Great.
Veolia.
Okay.
Yes.
Look, guys, I'm going to have to draw it to a conclusion because the bells have tolled yet again. Thank you very much for coming along and enjoying the film with us. And I hope you've enjoyed hearing our panel of experts. And we look forward to you all doing your 3 R's and making a difference in the world. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. I enjoyed it. Thank you. Brilliant. Yeah.
Right. Like this.